This is the screen that you get when you log in. One thing that I strongly suggest doing is getting a direct login to Zipform. So, right, we typically come into desk, go to Zipforms, and it logs us in. So you have to do that part to be able to change your password. So I'm going to show you how to do that first. If anybody remembers a few months ago, or like 6 months ago or so, we had an issue where it wasn't a Coldwell Banker issue, but you just couldn't log into Zipforms unless you had a direct login. So when you log in through CB Desk, you're going to come over here to the little person icon. If you have a photo uploaded in here, it'll show, but you're going to hit Profile and Settings, then Sign In and Security. And Coldwell Banker gives us a username, so you'll probably want to change this to something simpler. This will be like your username when you go to zipformsplus.com to log in. So once you do that, you would think reset password here, but you don't know what your password is because it's automatically assigned by Coldwell Banker. So you have to actually log out of the platform, come to this main login screen, again, zipformsplus.com, and you're going to hit forget password from here, and then you're going to enter that username that you just changed your profile to, and it'll walk you through the process of resetting that password. So if you can't get into CB Desk for some reason, or if you just want a shortcut to be able to see up here, I have Zipforms as just one of the things that I can click on and go directly into it instead of the step into CB Desk and then into Zipform. So I strongly suggest that for a few reasons, but I just wanted to start off with that. So back to Zipforms, right? So when you log in, whether it's directly through Zipforms Plus or you go in through CB Desk, you're going to come to this dashboard and you're like, what the heck is all of this? Well, you can use this to track different things, but this isn't a necessary portion of Zipforms. Like if you want to track all of your transactions, all of the money that you're making this year, you can do all of those things through here. But I always tell people just go straight to transactions. And this will be your main source of where you want to go in Zipforms every time you have a new transaction. And you're getting a listing, you're writing an offer for a buyer. This will be the main place that you go. So just think Zipforms, transactions, right? If you don't currently use Zipforms, you should set up templates. So this means going to this template section here, forms and checklists, and then you're going to set up a template for yourself for every purchase that you have and every listing that you have. And I highly suggest this because it makes your life easier down the road. So we're just going to do this. We'll do it for new purchase just so you can see what to do here. So I'm just going to name this training. That way I know what it is. So residential, you always need to select that. And then auto apply. Automatically apply this template to purchase or residential new transactions. You want to make sure you select that one, not the one below. So just the middle one there. And then you're going to click here where it says My Templates. And there are templates that have been set up already for the office. These are Camp Hill. So I know there's some York agents that are on here as well. So this will have Camp Hill's information in there. But you can go in and just swap out the address of your office and it should work just fine for you. So Office CB Realty Buyer Packet, if you click on that, you're going to hit Save. It's going to load, and these are all of the forms that you need for your buyer transaction and then some, right? So it's all the possible forms that you could need in a buyer transaction. And the next thing that you want to do once you get here is to fill out your own information, right? So you're always going to be the buyer agent when you're writing these contracts. So you're going to come down here, select selling agent and broker, and then you're going to type your information in and the office information. So it does look like this one doesn't have the Coldwell Banker info in it, so that's okay. But once you do all of that, I'm just going to type in some stuff there. I'm going to hit save just so you can see you will then show up here as the agent. And then once you go back into these documents, so we'll just click into, oh, here we go. First time it came up. Okay, so this old editor goes away in 5 days. So you've been getting this message if you use Zipforms that it's going away, and it's finally going away. So you won't have this option after 5 days, but I hope you were clicking on the open new form editor to begin with. So it's going to take you into what's called the workspace. And then your information, because you put yourself in as a party, is already going to be down here, right? And if you want to add any additional information to any of the other forms, so this is your workspace, this top section here. And this is every form that is in that transaction folder that we were just in. So if you want to add another form to this section, you just hit the plus sign over here and it brings it up, and then you can scroll down and it'll be here. So for buyer agents, this is something that you, again, your information, this would all be filled out if I would have filled out all of it in when I was in parties. So you don't have to do that. And then you would put, you know, the commission and broker fee and stuff in here. And remember, this is a template. So this is the only information you want to put in your templates is something that's going to apply to every single transaction that you do, right? So you can't put time frames, you can't put people's names, just your information and things that are never going to change, right? Your commission as a buyer, the transaction fee that you use per transaction. If there's any other information that you put on every transaction, you can put that in here as a template. Okay, so again, there's other things, the standard agreement of sale. Again, most things are going to be subject to the deal, so very little to fill out there. But we'll get into more of the workspace once we go back into transactions. I don't want to confuse you too much while we're in templates, but everything, again, that you put in a template is going to apply to every single transaction. So we're just going to go ahead and hit save. We're going to go back. Sometimes it'll pull you back to where like the main page. I'm not sure why it does that on occasion, but just FYI if it pulls you out of there. But again, we're in templates. Once this is set, leave it alone, right? So if we go, we say we put all of our information in that template, we're going to go back to forms and checklists, check that it's applied there. And then don't ever come back in here again unless you're changing something that applies to every transaction. So our main screen, again, transactions. When you have a new transaction, you come up here, you select new. It's going to ask you what kind of transaction, new listing, new purchase or offer. We're going to go ahead and say new purchase or offer. Type in, we'll do training again. Once you hit residential, it's automatically going to apply the template. See, mine's going to look confused because I just added that training one and purchase, but I would suggest just listing your template name as purchase so that you know. And then it's, again, going to pull everything that you input into that template into your new transaction. So hit save. It's going to spin for longer than normal because it's a training. So then this is a transaction, right? So this is the start of you creating something in, you know, any sort of documentation in Zipforms, right? So you can start to input information here if you want. My suggestion, especially if you're writing an offer, unless it's a for sale by owner, you're going to have an MLS number. So what I suggest doing is coming up here to MLS Connect, typing in that MLS number. Let me go find one real quick for you. I could have had that pulled up. But so if you don't, you're going to need to go into Bright Likely anyway, because you're going to want to download the property disclosure and things like that. So we'll just go through the whole process. And I'll just use my new listing that goes live tomorrow. That way we can, actually, I probably shouldn't do that because then I'll have myself as listing agent too, but that's okay. We'll work with it. So search, address search. All right, so here's the MLS number. You can go ahead and just copy, come back over here to Zipforms, paste that in there. I like to have a nice little photo. So we're going to hit find. It's going to pull all of that information in for the house. You're going to hit import. Do you want to replace existing data? Sure. Likely, if so, this is something, if you've written an offer for a client and you're going back into the same transaction, it's going to ask you this, right? So do you want to overwrite the other transaction information that was in there? If you're writing another offer for a client, probably very likely that you do. So go ahead and hit yes. And as you'll see, this makes your life a million times easier. You don't have to type all of the information in. If you want to come down here and use these other sections, you absolutely can. I will say that I don't, but all of the pertinent information that you need for your offer is going to come in and be pulled in through the MLS tier. So we'll go back to Bright real quick. So you would come in here, download the documentation that you need as well, because we're going to need to upload this information into Zipforms. So we'll just do one form. We're going to go downloads, training, SPD. All right. So once you have that downloaded, we can be done with Bright if we want to be, but I'll just leave it open in case. So we're going to come back here. Next step, parties, right? So I'm the listing agent, so that's why it pulled me in as well for that. This is my template for being a buyer. So that's where, that's why I'm listed here, because I already put my information in there. Then you're going to input your buyer's information. We'll just make this a full Danielle transaction because we're going to need an email to send for signatures. All right. So minimum that you need in here, most lenders will also want the buyer's address on there, but minimum you need for Zipforms is first name, last name, and email, right? If you're sending it to somebody to sign, you need to have an email. If you have an LLC or an estate or something like that, that's when you would use this signing representative box. So for instance, if you had, the estate of John Smith and his son Joe Smith was signing, you would write estate of John Smith up in this area, and you would write Joe Smith down here with his email, because people can't sign things like the estate of. They have to sign their own name. I know that sounds like common sense, but I have to say it anyway. So we're going to go ahead and hit save. If you have a second buyer, you would just go ahead, click buyer 2, do the same thing, first name, last name, email, any other information. If this is an investor or somebody that you're going to work with in the future, to make yourself or to save yourself some time, you can always just save them to the address book. That means in the future, if you want to, or if you're going to work with somebody again, you would just come up here and hit address book and then add them to the transaction. That way you won't have to retype out their information. So we're just going to stick with one buyer. As you see, I typically write on file for the seller's name. So you want to make sure that you have the seller's actual name on there. And you're like, well, crap, if they wrote on file, how do I find that? Easy, property disclosure, right? So you can open up the property disclosure, see what that seller's name is, go in here. Oh, I'm sorry. Just need to click on it. Type the seller's information in, and that will update that. So we're just walking through the steps up top here in the transaction. So we were in the summary section, we added the MLS, we went to parties, we put everybody that's in the transaction, right? Seller, seller's agent, buyer, buyer's agent. Next, we're going to go over to the documents. So again, this will pull all of the documents in from, I'm going to refresh this just because it was looking blank. There we go. All right. So FYI, that does happen on occasion. If you go to documents and you're like, what the heck, nothing's there. Refresh your browser, go back into the transaction. Technology, it's great when it works. Sometimes it has little glitches. So restarting your computer, logging out of something and logging back in are two of the easiest things you can do, and things will usually then work for you. All right, so once we're in here, we are now in documents. So next step, add that property disclosure, right? So you're gonna come up here to add doc. If you saved it to your computer, you're gonna browse, right? We did training, SPD. We're gonna load that in. All right, and now you have all the documents that you could possibly want in here. If there are ones that don't apply to your transaction, I like to clean stuff up. So I would first start, this isn't going to be FHA. So we're just going to select the things and delete the things that we're not going to need. Wire fraud is required. Cooperating broker is required. Affiliate business is required. Deposit money notice, we need that as well. I have a couple duplicates, but that's because it tried to pull both of my templates in. So you shouldn't have the duplicates. We're not going to do an appraisal contingency. If you are, keep that one in there. We're not trying to waive that broker fee. Lead paint, you would already have that from the seller's side filled out if you're using, or if you're doing a home before 1978. There's a lead paint brochure that you can send to your clients, that you're required to send to your clients for their review. Again, that's a duplicate form. Here's warranty information if you wanted to send that. They told me they don't want a warranty, so we're going to delete that. No division. And then you can leave some of these other rights. So if you're doing inspections, you'd want to leave that buyer reply to inspection. We're not going to do a price escalation. And there we are. So anything you want to delete, click the box. I will say if you click anywhere else in the square, it's going to open the form for you. So make sure you're clicking the box itself in that corner, and then just go ahead and hit delete. It's going to say, do you want to delete them? There we go. Cleans it up a little bit, makes it look a little bit nicer. So now we're ready to start filling out these forms. So same concept that we did when we were in the templates. You're just going to click on a form. This won't be here in 5 days, so don't go in there. Open new form editor. Your consumer notice is here. Now we want to add everything else that's going to go to our buyer that we need to fill out one, and that's going to go to our buyer for signatures. So we're going to add that buyer agency if you haven't done it already. If you're writing a contract, you should have probably already had the consumer notice and buyer agency signed, but for the purpose of this, we're just going to go ahead and put those in there. You're going to need that agreement of sale. You're going to need that buyer cost, wire fraud, cooperating broker, affiliate business, deposit money notice. We don't need these yet. And then down here, anything you uploaded is going to be all the way at the bottom. So training property disclosure. So as you see, all of the forms are in here, right? So if you want to reorganize anything that's up here, so again, this is your workspace. It's listed as such up here. This at the bottom is everything that's left in that transaction section with those forms that you haven't already added into the workspace. And this workspace is something that's different from that old version versus the new version. And it's something that I see people getting confused on. So workspace is literally where you're in there doing something, working on the documents, right? So this is not the signing portion yet either. So we will get there. But I have people say, well, where do the signatures go? Well, we have to get there. So first step, workspace is where you edit the forms. All right, so we're just going to go and you'll see, because we added everybody that's transaction, we're just doing a full me contract here. So buyer's name is up here. Agent name is down here. Same thing, pulls in, percentage and broker fee there. This is where the agreement of sale is. And while you did pull the MLS in, make sure that all the information is filled in properly. So something that doesn't pull in is a municipality. So just make sure that you're putting the information in if it's missing. Here. So again, if Coldwell Banker, it's going to be Coldwell Banker. So we're going to swap that to dual agent, but it will, again, it just pulled all the information in from the MLS. This isn't contracts training, so we're not going to go through here and fill all of this out. Jump on that contracts training with Trisha and Corinne to learn a little bit more about the forms. But again, we're just going to go through the zip forms portion of it. And if you are like, all right, I already know what's on all of these forms and you want to get to the next one, you can come over here and just click on it, right? So agreement of sale takes you to the first page of that. Buyer cost takes you to that form. Same concept with everything else here. Once you have everything filled out properly, that's when we then go to the signing portion. So all of the edits, like I said, are done in the workspace, and that's where we are right now. Once you're ready, you say, all right, I have all of the forms filled out how I want. I'm ready to send them to my buyer to sign the offer. Top right corner, prepare signing. Signing name. So this is also going to be what the subject of the email that your buyer gets to sign is. So training. So I would typically name it we'll just do that for that purpose. 1142 countryside offer, right? That way they can't be mistaken on where it goes. I don't ever put anything in a return folder. I'll show you what happens once everything is signed after we go through this. So signing name, you're going to hit create. All right, and then it's going to show you all those forms again in the same order that you had them in your workspace. Your next step is to add participants, right? So who's going to sign? We put everybody in the transaction, so you're going to add from transaction. And if you messed up and somehow forgot, you can add new, but don't forget that step of adding the parties. It makes life a million times easier. So add from transaction, buyer, selling agent, we're going to hit select. And then what it does from here, because you assigned the buyer and yourself as the selling agent, it's going to place those initials and signatures in the transaction for you. So same kind of concept as, dot loop does, but see, so it's placing the signatures and initials where they need to go. It's placing the dates where they need to go as well. So you'll notice that it's red. There's a red box around it and it says required. So we're actually going to scroll down because not everything is deemed required in the agreement of sale. So everything is where it belongs. And while this is supposed to happen, you still want to make sure that these boxes are where they're supposed to be, right? So don't just be like, all right, cool. I put the people in, I'm going to hit and send. You want to scroll through, make sure everything is where it belongs. So buyer initials here. The thing to watch for and that you need to pay attention to are the inspection portion. So this system doesn't know what your buyer wants to do. And sometimes your buyer may not know exactly what buttons they're pushing, right? So you need to have that conversation ahead of time. Are they getting inspections? If so, what inspections are they getting? And you need to delete the initials from the other side. So say your buyer wants to get a home inspection and a pest inspection. So you're going to come over here. You can click on the initial. You see that it puts a box around it. You can hit the trash can, or you can literally hit the delete button on your keyboard. They don't want this one. They don't want that one either. Nope, nope. All right, other part, as you'll see, these don't have red boxes around them, which means it's going to be optional for your buyer to actually initial them. And again, if they're not paying attention, I will say most of the buyers that I work with, they trust that I'm going to place the things where they need to be placed. And I appreciate that trust. At the same time, they should absolutely be reading and looking out for what they're initialing. However, I'm sure you've all been in the same circumstance where you send something out and you get it back in 5 minutes and there's no way that they read the entire thing. So it's your job to make sure that things are where they're supposed to be. So what you want to do is click on this box and then it comes up here. One, it tells you who's signing. But you then mark that over to required, which means they can't finish signing this until they've initialed everything that is required, right? So you want to do that on the same thing with the ones that are waived, because if nothing is initialed, that's not a valid contract either, right? So everything in the inspection section, whether it's on the elected side or on the waived side, you have to come in here and click it over to be required for your buyer to initial. All right. And then everything at the bottom of the page, again, just scroll through, make sure everything is where it needs to go. These two, again, so that deposit money notice, it's kind of built into the contract now. We do also have a separate form, but these are also two initials that are not required. If your home is not, the home you're offering on is not built before 78 and there's no lead-based paint disclosure, you don't have your buyer initial this, you delete that one, right? Say you deleted something that you didn't mean to delete and you're like, oh crap, where did it go? Right? So up here under tools, if you're not automatically on this little tile here, tools, initial, and then you just drag and drop it. And it automatically does apply as required. So you will have that red box around it. And same kind of concept goes if you are in here and you're like, oh crap, you know, I forgot that the buyer is requesting a home warranty from the seller, and I don't want to go all the way back into my workspace and lose all of the stuff that I've already done in here. You can go down to this markup section, hit text box, come over here, type in, you know, seller will provide 1 year HSA home warranty. All right. Make that look a little nicer. Since this is added, I know it's typed in, but I would still put an initial next to it and make sure that the seller initials that as well, because you did it after the fact. So that applies to, so if you have a lead-based paint disclosure, you know how when it comes from the seller, you know, there's the bottom portion of the box that you need to fill out that's like date of agreement, buyer information. You would use this text to put that information in there as well. All right, so cost puts both the buyer's agent and the buyer on there as well. Our wire fraud disclosure, we're good there. Cooperating broker, we're good on that one. Some reason it doesn't like to put the date in the affiliate business disclosure. So you can either use the text box to write the date out, or you can do auto date, which auto date just means whenever the buyer signs or initials this form, it's going to put that date in there. It does put information down here. If you're a little OCD like me, you'll probably drag that over. There's that deposit money notice and the property disclosure, right? So this is a PDF. So anything that you add to the transaction, so the property disclosure, the lead-based paint disclosure are two of the common ones that you'll need to add in here for signatures. The system doesn't know what it is. So you have to actually place the initials and signatures yourself onto the form, right? So same thing that we did when we added that line on the agreement, you're going to drag and drop, and it's going to put your initial where it belongs. A little shortcut, if you don't want to drag and drop everything, if you click this, this doesn't work for Mac, and if you have a Mac, I'm sorry, there's probably a way to do it, but control or copy and paste, right? So Control C, and then you're going to click on the document itself. So once you get here, click where that cursor is, Control V, and it adds it right there. And you can keep Control Ving, and it's just pasting the same exact thing, which is your initial for your buyer on the form. If you're like, I don't need to do that, you can, that's fine. Just drag and drop every single initial. It doesn't save a ton of time, but a little bit if you're using the control paste or copy paste. And then down here, the buyer signs. So you're going to drag their signature line over there. All right, so once you have all of that set, All of the initials are where they need to go. Then you hit next. And this is going to say, like, it's going to give you an expiration, right? So if you're writing an offer, you're not waiting 30 days for your buyer to initial or sign it. But most people are on it, so you don't have to change this, but you can. Sometimes, like if somebody is filling out like that electronic property disclosure and you're not listing for a while or something like that, you might want to set a reminder, but most of the time I never even touch this. Something else I want to note is if you hit custom invites down here, you can actually put a message in each of the people that are getting the forms to sign. So something that I typically do is just a brief rundown of everything that we already talked about, what each form is, and then hit send. So once you write something in here, training, save, and then once you hit send, it goes out for you and your buyer to sign. So they'll get the email, please sign, and it'll have 1142 countryside offer, right? Because that's what you put for that subject line. So what happens when the forms are signed? So you will automatically get email updates. It'll say, updated and complete. And once it's complete, everybody that signs an initial, so yourself and buyers and yourself and sellers and on a listing will get a copy of every single form that they signed. So while you still will need to give them an accepted offer, right, because the sellers would still need to sign it, they'll have their consumer notice, they'll have their buyer agency, they'll have their cost estimate, they'll have the wire fraud, they'll have all of those other forms already sent to them from the signing platform. So we're going to go back to my transaction so I can kind of show you. So this is, we'll just do it. So this was a buyer transaction that I had. Again, when you click in, it always goes to the summary. Once everything is signed, you're going to get a signing packet here. So this is whatever you named the subject is what it's going to be. So this was an offer that was sent out, and this is everything that was signed. So this is where you can download all of those forms. You will also get a link in your email that everything was complete and a link to each form. But I found that it's easier to download everything just directly from Zipforms. So if you just hit select all and download, you can download all of those forms. It'll walk you through how to download all of those forms onto your computer. And obviously, so once you get that signed agreement back, and you can upload them into My Deals as soon as possible. All right, so that was a very quick rundown of exactly everything you do from start to finish in terms of setting your templates, starting a new transaction, sending that transaction for signatures. Does anybody have any questions or any specific situations that they've run into that they haven't been able to kind of navigate or figure out?
Yeah, Danielle, this is Charlie Chadbourne. How are you doing?
Good, Charlie, how are you?
Good. Just a question for you there. Are there any published step-by-step directions processes for this?
I mean, no, because every transaction is going to be slightly different, right? So like this walkthrough was a basic walkthrough, but in terms of, I mean, what are you looking for in terms of filling out forms or this?
No, not necessarily filling out the forms, but to make sure I have everything, right? To make sure that I'm going through this process correctly.
Well, so if we do have that checklist.
Yeah.
So you can make sure that you have all of the forms that you need in there, right? So the CPA document checklist is going to be in the templates that you select. So if you check that, well, and this is actually a good example for people. So if you need to go back into a transaction, it's going to ask you if you want to open your previous workspace. So that's like the last thing that you were in. And you can go into that, or if you need to start anew, it's what we're going to do. So I mean, this is the checklist of all of the forms that you need on the buyer side and on the seller side. In terms of a step-by-step, I mean, that's kind of what this video is for. We've tried to write out some steps, and without having a screen or a picture in front of you, a lot of people tend to not be able to follow just, hey, this is how you
Sure.
would do that.
Okay.
So this is recorded. It'll go up on the YouTube channel, and I'll send the link out to everybody so you can go back in and reference it at any point.
Thank you. Very good.
Sure. Does anybody else have anything?